Do you agree with the school of thought that says colonization, the military rule disrupted the traditional role of representation by government, and that has somewhat stalled development in Western democratic setting?
There is an extent to which I will blame colonization for the problems in Africa, and that extent is limited because other economies that were also colonized, other countries, most countries in Europe, in Asia were also colonized. Then if you compare the levels of development in those jurisdictions and Nigeria, it's hard to blame colonization. Currently, the governor of Lagos State is not from Britain. The local government chairman of Ikeja local government is not from the UK. So we have Nigerians running things in Nigeria. So after 58 years, I think a lot of people expected a lot more progress, comparatively speaking. And also, why they do measure that is they know the amount of revenues that the country rakes in annually. They know the amount of revenue the state rakes in annually. They also know the amount of money that is budgeted, let's say, for instance, for housing in a particular year. And they try to match that sum to the facilities on the ground. And they see a very huge gap. And they're asking why? Why is that? What do you need to do for for this gap to close? So it requires a lot of things, a lot of actors to come together to the table. The first is that maybe we need to have a government that listens more.
Almost on a daily, we're faced with several crises. Take, for example, the street hawkers, collapsed buildings, floods, slum neighborhoods, and these problems are actually heaped on physical planners.
Participatory planning helps to solve a lot of problems because you are able to work together with people from the get-go to design programs for different districts and localities in the center. Then another problem is that sometimes planning is too, that's what they call it, is coming too much from the bottom, and the bottom is too far from the localities. Let me give an example of a community, let's say in Badagry. The seat of government is in Alausa, and there's a local government chairman in Badagry, and there should be other representatives at that level that are closer to the people, that can work together with the people. So certain decisions of governance need to be decentralized. Justiciability should not be a reason or basis, legal basis for non-compliance with the Constitution. Chapter 2 details the state's directives on principles of state policy, that objectives that should guide government at all levels in making provisions for all citizens of the country, and that does not mean, because there's just one line that said, you shouldn't have does not give citizens rights of access to the courts to enforce them. That means that the governors are excused from accountability. That is not what that section means. So there is still an obligation on states to fulfill those objectives, to work towards realizing those objectives that are spelled out, in the Constitution. And again, we have always argued that even the Chapter 4, the fundamental rights of citizens, that most of them are not realizable without reference to some of the rights in Chapter 2. Let's say, for instance, shelter and privacy. Privacy is a right under Chapter 4 of the Constitution. Privacy suggests that you live in a house. So your right to privacy means nothing. If you live on the street, then you actually don't have any privacy. So many of those rights are actually interwoven and interlinked, and you can't enjoy one without the other. There's been a number of cases where the courts have drawn those links between rights. I can't remember the case off my head where the court also argued, for instance, that the possession of a passport is a component of the right, the freedom of movement, that if you confiscate somebody's passport, you have infringed on the person's freedom to move about. So the same thing with the right to life. So many people's livelihoods are destroyed, for instance, when you destroy their settlements. And the Constitution protects the right to life. If you take over everything that gives life meaning, then the right to life just becomes just like void. So some of those arguments in a lot of jurisdictions have been, embraced by courts to say that, to hold governments accountable for the, enjoyment of human rights of citizens in all of those jurisdictions. What we need is maybe a more progressive-minded judiciary. More judicial activism can help to inspire also some fresh thinking in the way policies are being implemented at the executive level.